Hey guys, today's podcast discussion is with sociologist Dr. David Kutzik. Dr. Kutzik's theoretical work is based in intelligent agency, semiotics, the study and sign of symbols and their use of interpretation, information theory, which is based on Claude Shannon's historical paper, A Mathematical Theory of Communication from the 1940s, artificial intelligence and cultural historical activity theory, as well as social gerontology. In our discussion, Dave and I talked about a wide range of things that flow within those theoretical frameworks, including social media and dimensions of alienation in today's society. Please join me and let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you. Welcome to the Transformations Podcast. Here, guests and I will share our transformative experiences and will explore how to find excellence in life. Dr. David Kutzik, thank you very much for coming out and joining us on the Transformations Podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Good. I like transforming.
Well, here we're looking to kind of examine through different things. And for me, your work theoretically, philosophically, socially, technologically. But I'd like to start with social media.
Sure.
And you have an interesting theory that rhymes and about media mediation, and I'd like you to kind of tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, between the world and ourselves is this other object that connects us and completely channels what we see, what we think, what we feel.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of relating to people face to face, there's a whole generation coming up that's more comfortable using their magic glowing rectangle of choice. And I think that this is far from inevitable as a development and a very, very serious problem for humanity. People talk about, Kurzweil's singularity of artificial intelligence taking over. I don't think that's a problem. I think it's the corporate control of these devices and the channeling of all kinds of data and stories and narratives and images in such ways that it completely puts these very powerful blinders on people. And it's a serious problem. I don't know how we will escape it.
Yeah. I know I had written a paper a few years, maybe 6 years ago, that loneliness was becoming then a recognized health epidemic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Loneliness leading to suicide, leading to depression.
Well, loneliness is, one core point that I take from social science, it's an insight of Marx, actually, is that human beings are the ensemble or dynamic totality of their social relations with others. And these are real people in real time, face to face. It may be people even through a book or authorship or some other kind of recording of people. But the face to face everyday activity that I experienced as a kid, when we could just go out, after we came home from school, see what's going on with other kids on the street, just wander around and have unsupervised fun. Good amount of it ill spent. I can tell you stories about all the crazy things that we used to do as kids. Somehow most of us survived. By the late 70s, that begins to break down, accelerate in the 80s. Everybody's afraid to let their kids out. Everything becomes highly scheduled and routinized, almost like a corporate model of, if you want to do childcare, buy it as a commodity. And this has kind of set the stage for really a set of deep problems of what you might call extended dimensions of alienation on beyond what it used to be in terms of the separation among people. So it's an endemic problem. It's a major source of mental health issues and other things. The book you probably remember is Bowling Alone. We're bowling alone. And it makes some very good points that people are getting. I was just listening to statistics this morning, actually, at NPR, that a third of people have no, in middle age, have no friends. A third,
Right.
nobody they can talk to, really. And if you find yourself isolated, or even if you're in a marriage like I'm in, I'm lucky enough to have a significant other. There's still increasing isolation. Where we used to have many friends, now there are fewer and fewer. Part of it is life cycle. As you get older, friends fall away. But yeah, I think it's a real problem, and people seek community and friendship through this, and not all of it's bad. I stay off social media personally, except for Facebook, because I'm sucked in enough just with that. But it does keep me in touch with a dozen to 2 dozen people that otherwise I wouldn't be in touch with. And of course, all of this got compressed, extended, and deepened with COVID and the precautions everybody was taking. It just did a tremendous, reduction of face-to-face normal interaction. So it's a real cultural shift.
When I was growing up, there were some kids who bullied me, and I knew I could just walk a different route home,
Yeah.
And my wife's daughters, my stepdaughters, they're getting bullied on these Discord servers, whatever groups they're on in social media, and they're complaining and crying. And I say, why don't you just not go on? They're not real people, and they're not bullying you. They're bullying an image of you, right?
Right.
And so it's not really real, but it's psychologically real. And
Sure.
you could just not go back. It's
Right.
not like they're in your classroom, but for some reason they can't not go there.
Well,
If that makes
it's an
double
addiction.
negative.
It's an addiction.
It's an addiction. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've allowed myself to become addicted, frankly, on purpose, to have some sense of what people go through. But I keep it down. It's like I'm addicted to it's like saying you're addicted to beer and half a joint.
Right. Right.
So it's a different addiction than if I were on Twitter, now known as X, and
Right.
everything else, and was really focused on social media. But everything has become social media. My younger son, both of my sons, are or were award-winning journalists. Neither of them are in journalism anymore. And the younger one, who spent 8 years as a full-time newspaper editor and reporter, actually, for the Yiddish Forward, writing in Yiddish, left that. He's now in law school. And it's because everything is how many clicks can you get? How much can you get in terms of advertising revenue? In-depth reporting, forget that. We'd rather have a picture of a kitten or somebody having sex or a fight.
Yeah.
Because
You
kittens,
too.
sex, and fights attract. And I'm addicted to looking at kittens. I admit it.
Right.
On one level, but it's a really serious problem, especially if you understand an independent press as the fourth pillar of a democratic country.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
and without a real independent, vibrant press and engagement of people with that, you have a real serious undermining of what you might think of as, just broadly speaking, liberal democracy. And though I'm neither a liberal, I'm not a liberal, but I am a Democrat with a small d. And it's a very fearful kind of thing, because the flip side of this is complete and total surveillance.
Right.
And as you might know, I was involved in technology back in the 90s
I remember.
of using unobtrusive means, sensor systems, to gather data on people's behavior and to predict it. And the context in which I was using it was very, very limited to a person's house, to helping particularly frail older people or people with multiple diseases manage their daily routines and so on, and so that their caregivers could basically help themselves better. Very, very limited. My company was called Behavioral Informatics. It's kind of, I mean, when you consider that that's from the 90s,
Right.
it was really very early cutting edge stuff. The problem with all this is surveillance capitalism. And that's a title of a book I would recommend to you and anybody else by Shoshana Zuboff, who's a former, she's emerita professor of business actually at Harvard. And her earlier work was on the rise of the smart machines. And this is really on office automation. And she saw very quickly that the only way you could get people really controlled in a workplace is to first put them in a cubicle so they have no interaction. Two, put them in front of a screen with a keyboard. So everything they had to do had to go through that. And the development in the workplace of this automated process of control, similar to industrial production, also had a byproduct, which he called informatics, or she would call it automation and infomation, I think is the term she originally coined. And she wrote this material back in the 80s, and it's very, very good. But her recent book, I think it's about 3 years old now, is really a tour de force on what this all developed into. And it's really a means of total control of people politically and otherwise. And it's not like a fringe or, paranoid theory. It's pretty well, all the elements of it are quite strongly accepted. And social media is in the forefront of this. And people keep talking about artificial intelligence. Well, artificial intelligence is a buzz term developed by the Pentagon, that people use to get funding for their projects going back almost over 50 years now. So there are threats that come from the technology, but I'll suggest to you that technology is always a tool. And it's a question of to what purpose, who owns it, who controls it, what are their goals, and the machinery of it, the technology per se. It's not that I believe guns don't kill people, but they don't. It takes people with a gun to kill people. And it takes a corporation with these tools to really control people's lives in ways that could be ultimately devastating to our species. So for me, the threat is not AI per se, but rather the owners and the controllers that these very powerful tools are used to apply themselves to.
I was thinking about, Edward Snowden and
Right.
saying, and the effects of whistleblowing
Right.
on these kinds of things that are happening in a democratic country where they're not supposed to be happening,
Right.
theoretically.
Well, I think Snowden's a hero.
Yeah.
He should be getting a Congressional Medal of Honor.
Right. And, the powers that be. I mean,
powers that be want him dead.
Yeah. And then I think about when we first got this Alexa speaker in our house for Amazon. You can say, "Hey Alexa, what's the temperature in Maui?" or whatever. "Hey Alexa, how much are grapes at ShopRite?"
Right.
You had to say Alexa first before it turned on. And now we just talk and it'll say, "I'm sorry, I don't understand the question." And it was like, well, we didn't say Alexa. You're just listening.
Well, it's always listening.
Yeah.
And it's listened. You see, the way artificial intelligence like that works, and this is called machine learning using neural networking. And it's just a metaphor to neural networking. It's not really the same thing, but it requires the computer program guessing. Is this what the word means? Is this what the person is saying? And then being corrected, marked right or wrong, by a human listener. And the project behind Amazon is called the Mechanical Turk Project. Okay. And the Mechanical Turk is a very famous case back like 300 years ago, when people were building all kinds of mechanical automata that looked and acted like people. This was a chess playing guy at a desk, mechanical guy. He looked like a turkey, had a turban, and it could beat people in chess. What they didn't tell you is that there was a guy hiding in the table underneath making the moves.
Ah.
Okay. But this is a very good insight into how machines learn. Machines are taught by human feedback. And the mechanical Turk used by Amazon, you can Google it, would basically have people at sub-minimum wage listening to snippets of conversation and then grading the computer on whether it got it right or wrong. And when it got a wrong grade, the computer would come back, it would do what's called backwards propagation, and would kind of reset the balance of things. But way back when you were my students, and you were one of my favorite math phobes, actually. Okay, I taught you about linear regression. Probably don't remember it now. But the idea that you look for correlations and you try to figure out what is correlated with what, and you try to tweak the correlations. And that is all machine learning is about. Whether it's dressed up with fancier terms like neural networking, it's basically mathematically very similar to just a large-scale multiple correlation analysis that tries to make correct predictions. And the way it can make correct predictions when it comes to human language is by mimicking human beings, mimicking human dialogue, not actually being human or dialoguing, but making a very convincing, a very convincing, almost. I'm trying to avoid the word simulation of it, but simulation is probably the best word for it. It's simulated human behavior and speaking and writing and so on and so forth. And it's a very interesting area. There's a couple of great books that explain exactly how it works and a couple of very good videos. But there's no thinking going on in it comparable to actual human or animal intelligence. None whatsoever.
So I guess these are like the algorithms that follow us on social media. Facebook tells you what to put, what ads. You look at something on Amazon and then you go to Facebook and the same ad is there. I mean, we have things where Kelly,
Well,
my
this
wife
is used
Kelly.
to build those, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you look, for example, at the Netflix choice suggestion generator,
Right.
using the usual conventional means, they could not figure out how to get above about 4 out of 5 times correct. So they actually pay different groups of competitors $1 million prize,
Wow.
to have several teams figure out how to get it up to 80%, and out to 90%, and so on. Now they're, I think, a little bit above 90%, 92 or 93%. And these groups range from corporations to startups. One of them was actually a pair of roommates, I think, from MIT. And they would advance in this, and they'd figure different things out. And they figured out basically how you go about tweaking these kinds of prediction machines. And by prediction, I don't mean predicting the future, but predicting what your choice would be if you were to choose and you were to have the information. But again, I'm just emphasizing the extent of human element in this,
In the AI.
and ultimately the automation of what human beings would do if a human were doing it. So when we say a machine is smart, it's the same as when we say a human is smart. Okay, like there was a philosopher named Ryle. He took a kind of a interesting definition of intelligence. He said, when we say Jack is intelligent, what do we mean? And we mean by that Jack acts in ways that we label as intelligent. Okay, he acts intelligently. So intelligence requires some kind of action, but also requires an evaluation on the other part of people that it in fact is intelligence. That this is that he does something that has some kind of value and can be evaluated. So when a machine does it, we think, well, if a person were doing this, it would take intelligence. Okay. Therefore, the machine is intelligent. Therefore, the machine is smart. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's fine on what you might call the level of behavioral analysis. But in terms of actually what intelligence is, it's something I would suggest to you, very different. And I have been doing a lot of work on intelligence, as you might recall. And I've come to the conclusion that intelligence is something actually very simple. And I don't know if you want to go there. I don't know where you want to go.
Yeah, let's talk about intelligence.
So intelligence has a long and fraught history in terms of its ideology. Intelligence was, I think, first used by Spencer to indicate the quality that one species has another has over a capacity for thinking that is stronger than other species, and therefore it gives you an edge for survival. Much of what we get in the early 20th century comes through Sir Francis Galton, that regarded intelligence as inherited and racially grouped, smarter and dumb peoples, and so on and so forth. But I would suggest to you that intelligence is simply intelligent agency to basically take data and to convert that data to actionable information, usually data in the form of a signal of some kind. Okay, and that definition of intelligence would say that intelligence exists in all life, all the time, even on a cellular level. The way a particular cell operates in connection with its immediate environment is not strictly determined by a physical and chemical process, but rather is open-ended, where under these conditions, the cell may do this or it may do that. It may get punished for doing this rather than that, but that's a separate issue. What it does and how it acts is not completely determined by physics, chemistry, and its biological analogs. Rather, it has to do with information processing, where it discerns what may be significant and uses this to inform its next steps of behavior. So, in answer to the question, is there intelligent life in the universe? The answer is yes. Wherever there's life, it's intelligent. And that's a very different notion of intelligence than what most people think about in terms of human intelligence. But we have to remember, we're alive, and our intelligence serves the same function that it does for an amoeba.
Right.
Basically, it enables us to ingest what should be ingested, reject what should be rejected, and to act in ways that allow us to reproduce in two directions. One is to reproduce our own body and repair damage, okay? And the other is to actually reproduce ourselves in a new body. And the most interesting work on this, done in recent years, points in the direction of this kind of process happening with relatively simple molecules on a very low level of what you might call organized complex behavior. Molecules that have a catalyst and reactants, and when they react in a certain way, they, if you will, spin a cocoon around themselves and shut off that process. And then when the cocoon gets broken in some way, the process gets again into motion and rebuilds that cocoon. So it has two states, a dormant state and an active state of absorbing energy. And with it's called an autogen. That's what these guys are calling it, an elementary autogen. So it seems like some aspects of lifelike behavior begin to occur at a very, very low level. And it's likely that you don't need complex molecules for life to evolve randomly. You see, the other side would say that, that life you'd have to have like DNA somehow forming. It's impossible. Well, not impossible. It's highly improbable. But these other kinds of processes of things that are not even quite living, long before you have, eukaryotic cells or anything like that, are ubiquitous. So to come to intelligence basically is the cognitive aspect of life activity of any living organism. And the human intelligence system is different than people tend to picture it, and different as well from that of other animals. But it serves the same function as every other kind of animal. You might say, well, how is it different? Okay, it's different in that if you look at nature, nature develops two kinds of signal systems, two kinds of codes. One set of codes is analog, and analog is our own bodies and the real world. We get all kinds of signals and things. But there's another level also, and this is digital. And digital is separated so that its physical embodiment has nothing to do with the actual signal, but has to be decoded by something that's capable of decoding it. And DNA is the high point that begins to make life because it is a digital coding system that then is decoded. If you look at what an egg does, for example, it is an entire manufacturing plant, but it's based on basically taking the recipe and putting it into action, but it has to be able to decode that recipe.
Mm-hmm.
So the coding and decoding of information into molecules that now expresses something that's very different than just that molecule, okay, it's completely different, is an amazing feature of life. With human beings, when it comes to their cognitive abilities, we begin to use digital systems. Other animals do so very minimally. Our digital systems we refer to as linguistic. There's nothing in the word man that's the same as you or I as a man. Okay? There's nothing in the word water that conveys anything about water other than that our ability to interpret what that means allows us to do that. So when it comes to human beings, our thinking, first of all, invents, if you will, a second level of digital information storage. Information doesn't exist until it's actually interpreted from data. It's not inherent in things in the universe, in my opinion. And there's another point there, but I'm not intelligent enough right now to remember.
So
Right.
I've got.
You can stop me. I mean, I tend to be long-winded, so you can
That's
direct.
okay. I've got three things I'd like to comment on and ask for your feedback. So when I think about the cells that you're talking about, putting the cocoon around them,
It's not even a cell; it's just a molecule.
just a molecule. Okay.
Yeah.
And if we think about, animals' intelligence versus human intelligence, I think about a survival instinct versus an intellect. And how that maybe the word intelligence is being used, because the survival instinct of the molecule is to wrap
Right.
itself. The survival instinct of an animal on hearing or whatever is to run, or deer is to freeze. But a human's intelligence, they don't know those same survival elements at this point. We don't.
Well, that's because human intelligence, like quite a number of other types of species, is not individual.
Mm.
There is no individual human intelligence.
Right.
This is where philosophy and psychology, at least in the West, have kind of been mired. Okay, and I'm slightly exaggerating. Yes, there is an individual level of intelligence, but human beings' intelligence system is completely social.
Right.
What we know and what we understand of the world is not through direct experience. It's mediated, not simply by media, but through interactions with other people. We learn learn stories that explain things. So there's two levels of human intelligence. One is, you can see it, if you have to talk about this, the individual level. And on the individual level, we can't really separate it from the collective social level, which comes in linguistically and then through interactions with others. But I use a German word for this that means picturing. It's a multimodal sensory picture of the environment that is artificially complete. Okay, it looks as if our environment is continuous. Most of what we see and what we experience is not there. Okay, I was watching the World Series. Well, I didn't. I watched the Phillies until they didn't get in the World Series.
Yeah, me too.
But imagine that a batter cannot see anything of that ball coming towards him. It's all anticipatory. And you're a martial artist. it's all anticipatory.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is one clue to kind of animal survival intelligence. You know, um, the sensory world of a frog, the vision only comes in when there's an insect kind of movement. Okay. With human beings, we have a whole sense picture going on this level. And even if we didn't have language, we would still have that. Now, on top of this, there's no bottom and top. I'm just saying on top, there's what you might call the level of social consciousness.
Hmm.
And when it comes to human consciousness, it's social. Okay. The only way we can answer problems, if we have a question, is to ask somebody.
Hmm.
Okay. Siri is just an artificial person.
Yeah.
Made up of the collections of the answer to that question of many other people and taking, in a sense, the average of the sample. That's all it is. Okay. There's nothing more going on there. There's no sentience. Whereas with human beings, our social consciousness is, in a sense, over determining, almost everything else. So human beings, do we have a survival instinct? Well, you would argue we don't really have instincts per se. We do have reflexes. We do have certain cognitive biases that seem to be built in over our course of our evolution. We do, we have certain sensory mechanisms. If we had different ones, we would see and feel and smell the world differently, perhaps. But the overriding feature is that we have a collective intelligence. Okay. And the question that really gets into human intelligence for me is and gets into intelligence all the way through, is a question of agency, all the way top to all the way down. Can you act differently? Can you, in a sense, choose to do A or B? If it's a mechanical system, there's no choice. If it's a determined system, no choice. But when it comes to life, there's an element, not so much of choice, but what they have called semiotic freedom, a degree of semiotic freedom, a degree of being able to break away from the constraints that are imposed by physics. And when it comes to human beings, we're up in the realm of semiotics, which is all about basically the interpretation of meaning. Yeah. And all of that is basically a social process. If that makes any sense.
It does. I was going to ask you, because I know your research has been focused on intelligent agency and semiotics. And I was wondering, I didn't understand what intelligent agency was until all of this background.
Right.
And now I understand.
Right. There's no agency if there's determination.
Yeah.
We keep talking about, free will. Well,
right.
We're free to do some things. We're not free to do other things. We live in a world that's determined.
Yeah.
There are constraints. Okay. You have determination is usually viewed as coming through physical laws. There's issues with that I have. Constraints are usually left out of the picture. Okay. Constraints are like, well, there's a doorway. I'm looking at it. I can open the door and walk through it, but cannot walk through the wall. That's constraints. A garden hose constrains the water. Okay, It's not violating the laws of physics. It's in accord with the laws of physics, but it's not the laws of physics doing that. There's a structure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Where you have structures, you have relationships. So, so in order to have agency, you have to be able to navigate constraints. You have to, in a sense, know what is constrained and what is not constrained, and you have to find that out. Okay? Mm-hmm. When it comes to very primitive organisms, very simple organisms, just a little bit of movement begins to shake up the determination that's going on. You have, biologists 150 years ago talked about the acquisition of new habits. Okay? It's learning. Okay. There's no learning without this element of agency. Okay. Now, this becomes really scary because what are the actual intelligent agents of the present time? And here's where you have now non-human entities
Right.
playing the leading role. And I would argue that corporations and governments and certain other kinds of network formations that have certain characteristics are the dominant intelligent agents on the planet. They are the ones that are bringing about the ecological disaster, not individual human beings.
Right.
Okay, we don't have the power, the ownership and control, and the authority, as individuals, to really do very much about the ecological crisis. Okay, but these other entities are in charge of it, and there's an interesting set of ideas from this guy. He was interesting, kind of an urban planner type named Lewis Mumford. Nothing to do with Mumford and Sons. Okay, Lewis Mumford. Okay.
Yeah.
He talked about this idea of a mega machine, and in a mega machine, you, in a sense, tie different people together in a very closely knit team to accomplish a task, such as building the pyramids.
Yeah.
Okay, that everybody has to work in absolute direct harmony with each other, literally tied together with ropes, so that the motion of one influences the motion of the other, and they're in constant contact. And it strikes me that a corporation is kind of like a modern giant mega machine. But once you're in it, you're an employee.
Right.
And here's where I want to get to ethical agency. Because I would argue that ethical agency is highly diminished or eliminated in a corporate structure.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do your job. If not, you're just fired.
Right.
And doing your job could be doing something that is very injurious to other people, but you don't actually get to see the result. You're just pushing one little part of it, so-called division of responsibility. So people begin to subjugate their own agency, particularly their ethical aspects of their behavior, okay, to a larger agency, which now operates on a level that is disconnected from their individual agency. Okay, and that's what really scares me. So in order to have agency, you have to have intelligence. But intelligence is a very small kind of thing. It's actually a very big thing, but it's a very small kind of thing. Okay, which gives the agent information about it. No, it doesn't. Let me correct myself. It gives data that can be, by an interpreting agent, translated into information that informs behavior of what to do next. Okay, and this is what happens all the way up and down the chain of being, if you will, of intelligence, from minimal to, we like to think of ourselves as maximal. Time will tell.
Time will tell.
Time
I
will
hear it's
tell.
the dolphins.
Yeah,
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe. It's the
and the
dolphins who are the most
well, the dolphins are not destroying the
the
biosphere.
planet. Yeah.
Okay, they're not. We collectively are, but you have to look more closely. What agents among us are in charge? And that's what really troubles me.
Yeah. The corporations and the governments.
Corporations and my ideological proclivities, okay, politically, but these problems go across the whole range of politics, okay, and it's a real concern. So anyway, I don't know. I'm like all over the place, so you can keep directing me. I'll try to keep it quick. I'll try to answer
No, I
short.
appreciate the depth, and
Yeah.
our listeners will also. I
Well,
wonder what kind of government. I mean, do we need to return or embrace a new model of Marxism or communism? Not the
yeah.
authoritarian leader.
We need social. I think it's a question of socialism or extinction. Frankly,
Yeah.
you need some level of rational, cooperative governance of this global petroleum-based mode of production,
Yeah.
to switch from what humanity collectively has been forced to do to some other way of fueling, literally, our endeavors in a way that we can transition to become a much better collective steward of the biosphere.
Yeah.
Without
Energy.
some degree of real socialism, in other words, not every country and every entity out for itself.
Right.
Okay, not simply trying to exploit resources and people to accumulate as much as you can as fast as you can. You know, like the billionaire syndrome. Okay, you know, so I think you need, in a sense, on a global level, socialism. I also think that that you cannot have democracy without an element of economic democracy, political democracy, and social democracy, which I'm using different than political scientists might use the term. You know, so I would say, yeah, we have to look at a future that would be more socialistic if we're going to save ourselves from extinction. Authoritarian, it seems like people as a species have a real penchant for that. Okay, I fear it's not going away, but it certainly can be mitigated. And there's certainly ways to establish much more democratic participation on the lower levels of government.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, they say there's a saying, "All politics is local." Well, I think there are ways that people can develop, you know, that will allow for a lot more participation, input, and control um, than we have now. And that to me is an element of socialism. Um, and then, of course, is the class struggle. Who owns and controls the whole system? Well, that's got to change. If you're going to have billionaires, bankers, and oil merchants and weapons manufacturers
Right.
in charge of the planet, we're not going to have a planet. Okay, so it's so yeah, you have ethical dimensions to this, you have pragmatic dimensions to this. The the bottom line for me is still political economy. What's the political economic system? Because that's going to play a large causal role in what the possibilities are. So I don't know if that answers your question. You know, but that's kind of where I'm coming from. And there's a whole. If you bring up Marxism, there's a whole wonderful set of recent developments that are, if you will, ecological Marxism. That's looking at the present period as being the Anthropocene age, where human beings, really the petroleum mode of production since the 1940s, has, in a sense, become the dominant thing shaping, geological and climate, processes, right, affecting the biosphere on all ends. So I think Marxism has a lot of fruitful things to offer. I do. I don't think that proceeding the way we are now is going to lead to the survival of the species. So there's got to be some massive changes.
Yeah, untenable. I had spoken with some former CEOs at ExxonMobil, BP, and some other places while writing some articles, and I would ask them about, switching to wind, switching to solar, switching to this, and they said, well, nuclear is the cleanest energy, but the danger when it goes wrong is huge, but it doesn't go wrong that often, but people are afraid of it. They can't go in that direction.
Well, I'm part of a very small minority of people of my political and ecological persuasion that would be inclined to agree that nuclear energy is probably the most rational path for a transition to a more balanced energy system. Okay. Yes, it can be dangerous, but there's a trick in that, and that is you run smaller plants
Right.
at much, much less efficiency. Instead of running, instead of running the oven, so to speak, at 80%, run it at 35.
Right.
Okay. And people will point out, yeah, well, the half-life of the materials that come out of it are 10,000 years. But let me point out to you that you want a half-life that's very long.
Yes.
Because if the half-life was 1 minute, all the radiation in that would be
kill us.
out in 1 minute, and you'd have, we'd all be dead.
Right.
So if it's 10,000 years of slow ticking away, that's not good. But what's the alternative, the realistic alternative? Given that our cities and everything else is organized around tremendous electricity consumption.
Yeah.
What's the alternative? Now there are, within that, that's not enough. I mean, you can easily construct a list of other things that have to be done. But yeah, I actually have just in the last few years become actually convinced that nuclear power actually makes sense. Look, in the next century, not only Miami is going to be underwater, but early on, Bangladesh is going to be underwater. Okay? The Netherlands has a 200-year plan to accommodate rising sea levels.
Wow.
And they are looking at giving up about 40% of their territory, having the sea reclaimed. Okay. The United States can't have a 6-month plan. It's politically impossible, given our primitive and dysfunctional, political system. It's hard to say. We're going to be, so yeah, we have an energy crunch. Okay. I don't think changing it is going to be sufficiently fast to avert these major disasters that are going to happen. How do we plan for these major disasters? Do we take the survivalist route? We all get guns, and everybody has their own little nuclear power plant in the basement, and robo kill systems on our perimeter. Seems like Americans, some of them have a penchant for that way of thinking. Okay.
Indeed.
Yeah, one of our finer traditions, I suppose. But realistically and honestly, what is the plan? And we're so far away from being able to have that serious discussion with ourselves or with other countries. I mean, there's little agreements. They're all good. They're better than nothing. But Greta Thunberg is right. It's not enough. It's way too late. And the real plan is to do nothing for as long as possible. Just keep making money. And
our legislative branch can't even agree on anything. Can't even do anything. Everything is stalled. Everybody hates everybody. It's okay to lie, and just as long as it's not our side that's doing the lying. I mean, it's ridiculous.
This is a so-called post-truth society. You're doing a podcast with Porper, aren't you? I'm sure you'll hear all about it.
We did a little bit of that talk yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. But, yes.
I think part of the thing is going back to social media, where we're isolated. Our social group is inside of a device we're holding. We think we're friends with all those people, but we've never met 90%. I have 5,000 friends on my Facebook page, and I don't know most of them, but they put in a request, and I'm marketing books and
right, yeah, sure,
and different things, but I don't really know them,
sure.
And I maybe know 500, or 1,000 maybe from traveling and whatever, but then they're just getting into this feedback loop and an echo chamber, because then you and all your friends that you're choosing all believe the same thing. because you're choosing to defriend, unfriend, not listen to, and you're only going to Breitbart and Newsmax and Fox News,
Yeah.
or only going to CNN and MSNBC and not, and there's no more balance of what is actually true and truth and what is
Well,
real to
okay.
make decisions on. It's tribalism.
Well, yeah. It is tribalism, and I'll send you a copy of a book that's forthcoming, not mine,
Well, come
that
on.
gets into a very interesting mixture of evolutionary anthropology and cognitive psychology on tribalism.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Nice.
But yeah, it's coming out, I think, in April officially. Yeah, so it's
And
I'm probably should.
like I see this in martial arts. I see this in spirituality,
Right.
in Taoism, in
Yeah.
Buddhism. It's all the same thing. Our line is the correct line. We have the only real transmission. Ours is the original. But these 7 guys were your classmates, so why can't you have Funakoshi and Shotokan? You're familiar with Shotokan, having
Sure.
studied it, right? And then
Yeah.
you have under him his disciples, under them their disciples, and so on. And everybody's still arguing who's got the real system and what kata was taught which way.
Well,
And we say,
there's only one Shotokan, and that is Evans.
yeah, that's right.
Ski Evans. It's the
But the
only
martial artists
Shotokan.
are ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, he'd be the first to say it's ridiculous.
It's absolutely
Well,
ridiculous.
well,
And
people. This is how people's cognitive understanding of the world operates. I mean, at heart, I think human beings are animists. Okay, as if everything around us is alive and has intention. And then,
right.
that serves people really well in terms of navigating the natural environment, really well,
Yeah.
which is why we have bias. And then you have other things that are kind of akin to that, the in-group, the us versus them,
Right.
and the building of group solidarity based on that. And then particularly with the kind of religions that have spread all over the world, which are called axial religions, sameness of thought
Yeah.
becomes a major marker for in-group versus out-group.
Mm-hmm.
And relative isolation accelerates this. It's like a petri dish for it. And as we open this with a discussion of relative isolation. So it's very much so. I mean, the present situation in the United States, it's not just the United States. I mean, going off the rails in terms of truth, I think first happened in Poland about 8 or 9 years ago, where one political group that won basically said they just made up a whole new world. Okay, people on the so-called academic left have been preaching for 40 years that there's no such thing as truth with a capital T, but everybody has their own internal truths. Okay, we're ultimately stories we tell ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, that's a very, in my opinion, a very bad epistemology. Okay,
Well, that's when people say, "Well, what's true for you is not true for me, and we can all be happy," and blah blah blah. But I think that's just a load of crap.
Yes, but
Everything's relative.
when discourse denounces truth and renounces and then denounces truth, and that everybody has alternative facts to back up whatever they want. Look, we're dealing with fascism. Okay, and one key characteristic of fascism is the creation and use of myths. In addition to a cult of violence, hatred of outgroups, usually strong misogyny, and what people often call toxic masculinity. All these different things, and we're dealing with that in our country and in other countries, and the rise of it now. And we're dealing with the decline of liberal democracy. Liberalism as an ideology, as a framework, does not seem to fit with the way most people look at the world anymore. And this is a massive change. Because I'm using liberalism in kind of a more classical sense, in which most of the people who call themselves conservatives are liberals. A focus on individualism, a belief in scientific progress and technological progress, that The idea that 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 there's such a thing as human rights. You know, as I say, I'm not personally a liberal, but these are very important, useful ideas that are foundational to the way everybody has understood the political process, and that is collapsing. It's collapsing very rapidly, and the institutions that what we have of democracy, where democratic process resides. Even something as simple as the election process should be very simple. You know, are undermined by mass sentiment pushed by media. For the Trump position, which is that Biden lost the election and he won the election. Okay. And about a third of adults in the United States seem to believe that. And and there's also, a general cultural sense that I will believe and trust who my friends believe and trust, and what makes me feel good. This is right across all the spectrum. What makes me feel good. That's what's true for me. And
Well, in terms of the election and all the 60 failed lawsuits by Trump, I mean, we're talking about a mass cognitive dissonance, right?
Sure.
Because they're just following their cult-like figure because, they like him. They want to admire him. They think he's anti-government. He's going to fix everything, even though he's screwing every one of them.
Well, yeah. Well, he's the Evel Knievel of politics.
That's true.
And I like Evel Knievel. And his persona, did you ever see the stuff where he was
jumping the Grand Canyon and doing different... And I had an Evel Knievel toy with a doll.
Yeah, Evel.
As a kid.
I like Evel. I like the crowd.
And Kelly
the woman bearing the breath. This is for you, Evel. It's like people out of control. That's, a very friendly and entertaining environment.
Right.
And I imagine, in a way, it's quite like a Trump rally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because a Trump rally is all performance.
Yeah.
And here's a guy who's like lit his head on fire.
Yeah.
And is screaming all of these things that people in power really don't like to hear. Piss them off.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that element. I'm going to use another cultural reference. Remember Mars Attacks?
Mars Attacks, the movie.
The movie.
Yeah.
And you remember the old lady watching
the
president, which is Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
When he gets stabbed through the back with a huge tentacle. And she's like applauding in her living room. This is great. Right. The whole thing is blowing up. And I can understand, after decades of right-wing talk radio, why a lot of the segments of American population, particularly in the South, which is not necessarily geographic South, okay, are titillated by this. And I'd be a good candidate to kind of enjoy it also, if the politics were a bit different coming out of the guy's mouth.
Right.
If he were, on the left, I would probably find some of this entertaining also. The problem is, if you look at Trump and you took away the cameras and the microphones, Trump disappears.
Yeah.
This entire phenomenon, 100%, is the creation of media. And let's look at the official news media. It's very different than it was. Okay. On the one hand, journalism has been dismantled as a profession. There is no route for a young person to have a job in journalism. Even the people you see reporting from Gaza, for the networks, a lot of these people are independent contractors. Okay, they're no longer paid by the network. They're no longer insured by networks. I'm not talking Martha Raddatz or whatever. I'm talking, the various stringers. And then you have the dismantling of professional journalism. Okay, which if you want a free press, that should be extremely alarming. And then you have, in addition to that, the lessening of standards from the FCC on what a station has to do in order to get a broadcast license. In the past, they had to have news, real news. Now they don't. Fox News gets around it by reclassifying their news as entertainment, not news. Okay, this is what they've done. Okay, and they make up for their quote unquote real news with a local news show. Okay, so we've kind of taken news out of news. We've decimated journalism. Not we. See, I'm slipping into it. The we. There's no we here. You know, as Tonto said to the
Lone
Lone
Ranger.
Ranger, "What you mean, we white man?"
That's
We're in
right.
trouble, Tonto. What do
I
you
thought
mean?
you were. I thought you were dropping some secrets about how you did this.
No. This is how our social consciousness
Yeah.
in the American ideology of our culture has us thinking and talking. But the truth, it's really they. It's really they and them. And it's not just a vague they and them. We understand where the pockets of power is, who's in charge, and how the decisions are made. Okay, it's not rocket science.
More people today are getting their news who are under 30 on social media, from YouTube, from wherever else, Facebook, bazillion YouTube channels, including this podcast channel.
Yeah.
But so anyone can deliver any news they want. And more people are watching that than the networks and even the streaming networks, like cable networks, I mean.
Right.
Right. And
Sure.
the cable networks are worried in another 20 years, there's no one watching because people are dying who were their audience. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
We talk about where's the journalism. We just have people giving opinion on news, an opinion on things that is not really researched.
True.
Right.
Sure. And it's very frustrating. It's very sad when you realize the technological platform here. This little cheap thing, which anybody can afford one. Maybe not this one, but
That's
another.
right.
Anybody can broadcast anything they want to say and potentially be seen by everybody, almost everybody else with such a device in the world.
Yeah.
That's an incredible potential freedom. And then you see how it's actually being used.
Right.
And, this is the big problem with technology. It's not the device. It's not the tool.
The people, always people.
It's how it's used, who owns it, what are the goals of it, and so on and so forth. It's very frustrating, because growing up, I could only dream of having my own television studio.
Beam me up, Scotty. I mean, we didn't have any of this tech. I mean, that was all science fiction.
Yeah, it did seem like science. It was science fiction.
Yeah. And now you can make your own TV show, radio show, soap opera.
Right. And instead of seeing an outpouring of incredibly good things, we see basically bilge. It's really sad. I can't help but laugh at it. I mean, it's really painful and sad to see. But so with the disappearance of, look, you have news reporters that report as if it's news on the statement of a government official. What kind of reporting is that? This is taken as being normal. That's not normal journalism. You fact check. Okay,
Right.
we don't take. Everything's become public relations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not simply opinion; it's PR. And who's pushing the PR? It's simply beyond out of control.
The other thing related to this is the idea of branding and self-branding. I mean, everybody's an expert. Everybody's a quote guru, right? In the late 90s, I worked for a company that did newsletters and products on financial investing and healthcare, two separate silos, and it was all direct response marketing. And it
Right.
made me sick to write copy and reviewing things that I had to leave the company because they were making all these statements. Lactoferrin from mother's milk is what makes a good immune system in a child. Olive leaf extract has also been shown in pigeons to help their thing. So our product with lactoferrin and olive leaf extract is going to could keep you healthy, da 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 da. And then they're going to sell it and then put you on an auto renew thing and all this crap. And then they'd have somebody posing with it, a doctor that they paid $500 to put his picture on the thing. Uh, and and you're assuming that this is real, and this doctor now becomes the brand, you know, whatever he's saying, but it's copywriter's writing. He just licensed his picture for a monthly fee. And all direct response marketing is like this,
Right.
or most of it. And I had to get out of it. It made me sick. And
Right.
then they had me read a book called You Are a Brand, and it's like how to make yourself the brand and the expert. So whatever you say, and you see on YouTube now, that's all you see
Right.
is all of these individual brands of people with their channels, with their products, with their makeup, with their commentary. And it's just like, it's ridiculous. It's
It
disgusting.
is. I try to stay away from anything like that
The
until.
only one I like is the Wiley brand. That
Well,
one is good.
the Wiley brand is good.
The Wiley,
It's a shame you don't have the coyote
the coyote with it.
to use with that.
But I mean, that's like the brands are made out of narcissism in a sense for power and recognition. And
Well,
and
it's
that's
as if everybody's a little corporation,
right. There it is. Mm-hmm.
and even when from a corporate point of view, one's identity. There are all the financial obligations and contracts they have. And all a
Right.
corporation is really a bunch of contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you are your brand. You are your little corporation.
Corporation.
And everybody's now working for themselves. Everybody's an entrepreneur. That's a trigger word for me. As soon
Yeah.
as I hear I have a number of trigger words. Entrepreneur is one of them. It's actually French for undertaker.
Is it?
Literally, it means a between taker. In German, it's Unternehmer, undertaker.
So how did that get to a person who tries to develop a business or enterprise?
So an undertaker would be somebody who would
So
hire
who
day job,
undertakes?
under
Okay.
job. Well, no, they would hire carpenters to work for a day.
Oh,
Journeymen,
yeah.
day jobbers, and to do a quick job because no one was building coffins.
Hmm.
If you begin to look,
I see.
there was no occupation of building coffins, so we need a quick jobber. The undertaker would hire people and get people together to do things. So you bring different people
I
that do
see. I
different
see.
jobs
I
together,
see.
and there's nothing wrong with it. I've been told I'm one of the most entrepreneurial people, who was an academic, and there's nothing wrong with bringing different groups together. So what purpose? What's the goal?
Right.
Who are you injuring in this? Who's benefiting? What's the business? But when you get to brand, that has nothing to do with it.
Right.
Brand is a creation of this projected image. It's PR. It's the bundle of PR is the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And academics became full of this about 20 years ago, and I never really had the emoji to express how I feel about it, but it would be it would be a gif of just projectile vomit. It's just I just hate branding is a trigger word for me. I'm
Right.
telling you, I mean, it's like damn.
Well, if you're a socialist or you like Marxism, I mean, you want the community to be equal, not branded. A single individual's branded, yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, look, I mean, there are brands and brands. I mean,
Yeah.
it should be about something that's real,
Right.
as opposed, and you look at politics. Politics is all branding. It's all we used to call packaging. That was what we called
Packaging, right.
packaging. You know, again with breakfast cereal, you're paying mostly for packaging.
Right.
Literally. You know, but with politicians, what do you know of a politician? You know what you're showed of the politician. Okay, it's all PR.
Yeah.
And in the absence of a critical press, that's really going to be trying to explain things and
So
It's a real problem.
I know we've only got a little bit time left on your schedule. So
So I'm flexible for a little bit more. Let's see. Yeah.
yeah,
So another 15.
yeah, that's what. But I wanted to talk a little bit about gerontology and
Sure.
your work with technology in that. And
Oh,
I remember in the mid 90s, when I was at Drexel, you had developed a sensor, and I think you and Tony Glasscock had written an
yes. Yes.
article to how many times does somebody go to the bathroom because they don't remember, when they wake up in the middle of the night to
Right.
go. I think you told me, and actually, I have a note here because I pulled something from that article. I think, or the one I pulled from is from 2000. So the
Yeah.
article's behavioral telemedicine,
Right. Right.
a new approach to continuous, non-intrusive monitoring of activities of daily living in
Right.
Telemedicine Journal 2000. Okay, fully automated, passively activated data acquisition system was developed to allow routine, continuous, non-obtrusive monitoring of selected activities of daily living. And we're talking about things like opening the refrigerator, going to the bathroom, taking meds, things
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. It says something interesting here. The individual continues to undertake his or her normal activity as if the system were not in place
Mm-hmm.
because it's non-obtrusive, right?
Right. 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 Right.
And the objects in the environment, pill bottles, refrigerator door, kitchen cabinet, are electronically monitored, but not the individual, him or herself. And that's what I think is the most interesting, even though it's probably not from your side of it. From my side of it, the most interesting thing is most healthcare practitioners, whether allopathic medicine or naturopathic medicine, always are want to monitor the individual.
Mm-hmm.
How much did you eat? How long did you sleep? How many times is your mind racing? Did you do push-ups today?
Right.
Did you eat 4 meals today and 18 snacks?
Mm-hmm.
Your system is completely not interested in that, but more on the things that they're doing, not related to the specific.
Well, yeah. So this was commercialized and was eventually acquired by Intel and GE, and was eventually incorporated into the health insurance system for the elderly in the Netherlands.
Okay.
And I thought would really begin to have a major impact on caregiving. And then General Electric decided, for business reasons, that there was not enough money to have this as one of their subsidiaries and shut it down in 2009. So, the original plan and hope was to actually get this into a national healthcare system. And it's a
Right.
Pyrrhic victory. On the one hand, we accomplished that, Tony Glasscock and myself. On the other hand, that was its high watermark. There wasn't enough money to be made from it. And this, I don't have time to go into it. This is probably the most deeply documented case of technology of this type and what happened from beginning to end of anything ever done. We have one monograph and one collected volume, all about the use and the history and everything of this. So there's quite a bit on it, and I even if you look me up on Google, I'm giving a lecture that describes exactly how this worked and about it. So that's just an aside. You can edit this stuff out.
Is that the one at the NIH?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I watched
It's
it.
not very entertaining, but it kind of lays out what it is, what happened, what I think about it. What part of this is interesting to you? I mean, you said you're interested in that. That the system was not looking for very detailed information, rather granular information. That was
Well,
interesting.
most because the way the healthcare systems, everything has to go through insurance, so the insurance has to, of course, approve it. There's a lot of barriers to entry
Sure,
for a
sure.
product like yours to go nationwide, right? I
Right.
would think. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's looking at things that seem to be the opposite of what most healthcare providers are looking at.
Right.
Right. So that's a big barrier to entry. But it seems to be a very effective and different way of looking at things to help a person than what's the norm. So that's
Yeah,
interesting to
it's a
me
very,
because
it's a,
you're
yeah,
looking at something, a different data set,
right.
and it's being extremely useful. Duh.
Well, it
So,
doesn't, this comes out of gerontology and
right.
ecologic, what would used to be called uh, environmental psychology, the work of people like M. Powell Lawton,
Mm-hmm.
who developed the whole literature and the techniques of ADL stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and does not come out of medicine. Okay, this
Right.
comes out of behavioral science. Okay, so there's a very
Mm-hmm.
different shift in paradigm. We're not interested in the individual body. Rather, we're interested in their behavior. We want to look at changes in behavior that could indicate a problem. Somebody
Yeah.
doesn't get out of bed. That could be a problem.
Right.
Usually it's nothing, but could be a problem. Check in on them. And all of this provides data, oh, you'll like this, that then a caregiver can interpret into, translate it into actionable information and
Yeah.
take information on the basis, take action on the basis of that.
Giving better
So,
care.
yeah, you see how this ties in with the intelligence idea.
Right.
Now, what eventually happened is we found that caregivers found very clever ways of using this. Like in the Netherlands, it was a designated kind of nurse practitioner type. And she could look at her clients in the morning and see who might need a phone call or a visit. It also leads to a lot of unscheduled visits, okay, and so on and so forth. But we're not concerned. Uh, it's actually interesting on that point. So one potential investor at an early point was a fella who made he must have been worth well over $100 million. This guy. We're in his house. The meeting for the big guys, not the technology guys, is going to be on his yacht, which is parked in his backyard. Okay, I mean it's unbelievable.
So he's an
And I
underachiever.
show him a prototype of a pill monitoring system. And I apologize when I say this one doesn't really distinguish between this medicine and that, just whether a person interacted. And he was a medical doctor. And he said, there's nothing to apologize about. Right now, we have no information.
Right.
We know nothing. This gives you what, 70%? 70% compared to nothing?
Right.
That's like,
And non-compliance is one of the biggest problems in healthcare. The
sure,
doctors are following you and the patients are non-complying with taking of their
right,
medication or doing of their things. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Or as I would say, non-adherence. You know,
non-adherence.
a person can choose not to comply, and they can sometimes be right.
Right.
Yeah, a lot. My
Yeah.
earliest articles were all about that and medication, actually. Yeah, it's
Okay.
kind of funny. But yeah, it's like, that really opened my eyes. He says, "Look, we have nothing." Um, in the advisory group for this company that once it was getting commercialized in New York, which I'll tell you about in person. I don't
Okay.
think
Yeah.
I don't want to get sued for whatever. Uh, there was a guy named Robert Butler, and he was the leading geriatrician, the top guy in the medical field of all people. And he was so excited to have any way of measuring sleep. He says, we know nothing about sleep. We have no idea when people get up. This actually shows you. So I figured this would be a good place to get data that you could do a lot of academic stuff. Eventually, I lost control of the data
Mm.
and got locked out of the whole field of work.
Wow.
So I had to change everything I did. It was either that or get other investors and start something else.
Right.
But forget me. I mean, it's just a side point. It's just funny. Uh, so now we
Right.
know we have a lot of data, and you wonder why. Actually, just so you know, why it said unattached from the person is because there was already a patent stream of attached to the person coming from medical devices. And
Right.
there was no way we could patent this.
The wearables. Yeah.
Wearables. With this, you could patent this and attach the wearables as a subsidiary thing. But you could not, if you didn't distinguish it was unwearable, that was one of the novelties
Hmm.
that allowed it to, to go forward. So,
So again, the corporations, GE or whomever, are saying yes or no to our to our improvements
Well,
in quality of life.
in fairness to GE and everybody else that made a big mistake, this was not a technological play. This was a caregiving play.
Right.
The people that are really using this are not the old people, but the team of doctors and or the family group that's organized with some support, professional support, to interpret the data and to react to it. Okay. And GE or Philips or Honeywell, these are different groups, British Telecom, why would they, in their right mind, get into a caregiving play? Delivering care? You know what the liabilities are? And when you introduce this technology, now it has 24/7, and you're open 9 to 5. What are your liabilities with this information? It's very complicated, within, the existing capitalistic, market-oriented business environment. So, in a way, if I were in GE, I would say, of course, I'm not going to fund this. This is an unknown. It gets into all these areas that we are not our primary business. The key thing in business is to keep the main thing the main thing.
Right.
There's no real
It can't
business.
be capitalism over healthcare. That's the screwed up society. There has to be a way to.
Yeah, well, look, there's capitalism and capitalism.
Yeah.
Okay, the capitalism of 50 years ago, before you were born, was a capitalism in which if you got sick, you went to the doctor. You did not worry about insurance.
Right.
That was also capitalism. Okay, the journalism of 50 years ago was when the president of the United States says to 60 Minutes, "You don't put that on TV," and he has a vice president get on and make a speech attacking 60 Minutes. They not only put it on TV at 7 o'clock, they repeat it at 10 o'clock, and then have the CEO of CBS, who was a guy by the name of Paley, okay, get on and lecture the president of the United States about the need for a free press and a democratic country. That was also capitalism. And Paley was a conservative guy, a conservative businessman. This wasn't radicalism. That was also capitalism. Okay, academics. It used to be that college wasn't the best thing in the world, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world for people that attended it. Now it's become the major means of exploitation and moving wealth from working class and middle class families into the 1%, using predatory lending practices. And they become basically machines for making money. Okay, I had to shower when I went to work. I had to shower when I came home from work, because of the business model. And that takes me right to the real key issue, is a radical transformation of business models across the board in this new modern form of so-called neoliberal capitalism. Okay, and this has made profit supreme, number 1, 2, and 3, instead of actually delivering the service or recognizing that everything is not going to be equally super profitable. You have to carve out, like the way networks used to carve out for news. We're going to have no journalism in this country unless, in a sense, a government or some other entity, some charity organization, actually creates foundations to pay journalists, because no company will do it. Doctors have turned in, the way doctors work now, they might as well work in McDonald's.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Kutzik, for spending this time with us today on transformations. Quite an interesting conversation, and your insights have been quite valuable. I've enjoyed it very much.
Well, thank you. I hope to see you again soon.
We will.